We're going to talk about special pairs of angles. What is an angle? An angle is an intersection of two rays with a common end point. Okay, so an angle has three parts. It has two sides, okay, the rays that make the angle, and one vertex where the side meets. Okay, so we have one side here from A to B, you have another side from B to C, and you have your vertex right at that dot above the B. So an adjacent angle is an angle where two angles that are next to each other and have a common ray between them. So they're basically next to each other. A, B, and C there, they're next to the angle C, B, and D. Okay, there's that line right there in the middle that indicates that they are next to each other, and they have a common vertex down here, common endpoint. Okay, so let's practice a little bit. Let's look at these. Try to decide if these angles are adjacent or not. Put the video on pause and see if you can decide. All right, how did you do? Let's take a look. Okay, our first angle is adjacent. Okay, they are next to each other, and they have a common vertex. The one in the middle is not adjacent. They are not next to each other. They're separated. Although they do have a common vertex, still not adjacent. And the third angle is not adjacent because there's not a common vertex. There are two endpoints, which indicates that they are not adjacent. Okay, so we talked about adjacent angles. What is a congruent angle? We're getting into some vocabulary here. Congruent angles have the same angle measurement. That's a congruent angle. Congruent means the same. So we have two angles here, 110 degrees on both of them. They are congruent. All right, let's practice real quick. Are these two angles congruent? We have one that is 75 degrees, another one that is 110 degrees. Put the video on pause and see if you can answer. Okay, let's take a look. No, they are not congruent because they are not equal. Remember, congruent angles are the same. Okay, so we have adjacent angles, congruent angles, complementary angles. What is a complementary angle? A complementary angle are two angles with a sum of 90 degrees. So if we take a look at this angle on the right here, one angle is 40 degrees, the other is 50 degrees. If you add them together, they equal 90 degrees. That would mean they are complementary. So complementary means the angles add up to 90. Okay? They don't have to be adjacent. You can have two angles that are separate. But as long as they add up to 90 degrees, then they are complementary. Okay, let's take a look at this angle. We're going to be able to figure out what the missing angle is based on the theory of complementary angles. Now, we have a 50-degree angle, and then we have a number 1, which means we don't know what angle that is. So what we can do then is we can take 90, we can subtract 50, and that would give us our missing angle. Right? The other way to look at it is 50 plus what equals 90. Okay, and then 40 degrees would be our answer. Right? That would be the missing angle. 40. Okay, 40 degrees plus 50 degrees equals 90 degrees, and those would be complementary angles. Okay, so we've taken a look at complementary angles, which are angles that add to 90 degrees. Supplementary angles are angles with a sum of 180 degrees. Okay, now 180 degrees, it looks like a line from one end, a line to the other. It doesn't look like an angle, but technically that is an angle, and that line is 180 degrees. Okay, so if we take a look at these two angles, we have 40 degrees and we have 140 degrees. If you add those two angles, they equal 180 degrees, indicating that they are supplementary. And once again, the angles don't have to be adjacent. They could be two angles that are separate, but if they add up to 180 degrees, then they are supplementary. Okay, let's practice. Okay, so we know that we have a straight line, right? Which means this straight line is 180 degrees. We have one angle that's 125 degrees. What would be the missing angle? See if you can do that on your own. Pause the video. Okay, how did you do? Let's take a look. We take 180, we subtract 125, and that would give us the missing angle, which is 55 degrees. Okay, the last type of angle that we're going to look at is vertical angles. Okay, remember we're talking about pairs of angles, so that means two angles. All right, adjacent, congruent, complementary, supplementary, and here is vertical. So what is a vertical angle? Those are two angles that are opposite of each other when two lines intersect. Okay, so we have an intersection here. And with that intersection, it created four angles. Angle 1, angle 2, angle 3, and angle 4. Vertical angles are the opposites. So angles 1 and 3 are opposite. Those are vertical. Angles 2 and 4 are opposite. Those are vertical. The other characteristic about vertical angles is that, number one, they're opposite, but they are also equal. So angles 1 and 3 are equal, and angles 2 and 4 are equal. Okay, let's take a look here. Okay, knowing that information, we will be able to find the missing angles when we know the measurement of one of the angles. So we have angles 1, 2, 3, and then angle 4 is 35 degrees. So we just looked at vertical angles. We know that vertical angles are the opposite and they are equal. So angle 2 then, based on that, would be 35 degrees. Okay, now that we know that those two angles are 35 degrees, look at this line. This is 180 degrees, right? And so we have 35 degrees here. What could we do to find this angle? We would take 180, subtract 35, and that would give us 145. Okay, and by angle 1 being the opposite of angle 3, we know that angle 1 will also be 145 degrees. All right, so our special pairs of angles, okay, when they're adjacent, they're next to each other. When they're congruent, they are equal. When they are complementary, the two angles equal 90 degrees. When they are supplementary, two angles equal 180 degrees. And then finally, our vertical angles are opposite angles, and opposite angles are equal.